It's a big question thinking about where the next great human fossil might turn up. People have been searching for these bones for a long time, and every time someone finds something new, it changes how we see ourselves. It shifts our understanding of where we came from. It tells us more about our deep history, going back millions of years. But finding these fossils is incredibly hard. It's like looking for a tiny needle in a haystack the size of a continent, sometimes even bigger. Still, people keep looking, and they keep finding things. So, where could the next big one be? First, it helps to understand why finding any fossil, let alone a human one, is such a big deal. Most things that die don't become fossils, they just rot away. For something to fossilize, it needs very specific conditions. It usually needs to be buried quickly, often by sediment like mud or sand, sometimes by volcanic ash. This protects the bones from scavengers and from breaking down too fast. Then, over millions of years, minerals in the surrounding water slowly replace the organic material in the bone. This turns the bone into rock. It's a rare process, and even when it happens, the fossil might never see the light of day again. It could stay buried too deep, or it could be destroyed by erosion or tectonic activity before anyone finds it. So, when we talk about where the next big find will be, we're talking about places where these conditions were right in the past, and where those ancient layers of rock are now exposed on the surface or accessible in some way. For a long time, and still today, East Africa has been the champion. It's often called the cradle of humanity, for a good reason. Think about the Great Rift Valley. It's this massive geological feature, a huge crack in the Earth's crust, stretching for thousands of miles. This rifting has been going on for millions of years, and what it does is expose really old rock layers. Layers that were once deep underground are brought to the surface. It's like a giant natural excavator. Also, the Rift Valley had a lot of lakes and rivers in the past, and these watery environments are perfect for fossilization. Animals die near water, get buried quickly in the sediment, and then the process can begin. Plus, there's a lot of volcanic activity in the Rift Valley. Volcanoes are dangerous, but their ash can be amazing for dating fossils. It forms distinct layers, and scientists can use radiometric dating techniques on these ash layers to get very precise ages for the fossils found above or below them. So, when people talk about East Africa, they're thinking about places like Ethiopia. This is where the famous Lucy Australopithecus afarensis was found in the Afar Depression. Lucy was a game changer. She showed us that our ancestors were walking upright millions of years ago, long before their brains got big. And Ethiopia keeps giving up treasures, like Ardipithecus ramidus, which pushed our understanding of early hominins even further back. Then there's Kenya. The Turkana Basin, especially around Kubifora, has yielded incredible finds. More early Homo species, tools, and a huge amount of information about the environment our ancestors lived in. Richard Leakey and his team did amazing work there. And Tanzania with Olduvai, Gorge, and Latoli. Olduvai is practically a textbook on human evolution. Mary and Louis Leakey worked there for decades, finding Homo habilis, robust Australopithecines, and some of the earliest stone tools. And Latoli, with those incredible fossilized footprints, showed us that early hominins walked just like us, more than 3 million years ago. Imagine walking across volcanic ash that turns to rock and preserves your steps for millions of years. It's truly amazing. These East African sites are still active, teams are still out there walking the ground, looking for tiny bone fragments. As there's so much more buried there, just waiting for the right erosion or the right pair of eyes to find it. But Africa is big. It's not just East Africa. South Africa is another massive hotspot, sometimes called the cradle of humankind. This area is different geologically. Here, we're mostly talking about limestone caves. Over millions of years, water seeps through the limestone, creating caves. And sometimes, animals and hominins fall into these caves or they use them for shelter. Their bones accumulate, and then over time they get covered by sediment, often cemented into a hard rock called breccia. Sites like Sterkfontein, Swartkrans, and Kromdraai have given us many Australopithecus specimens, especially Australopithecus africanus and the robust Paranthropus species. These caves are complex. Extracting fossils from breccia is like chiseling them out of concrete. And dating them can be harder than in East Africa because you don't always have those nice volcanic ash layers. But the finds are incredible. And then there's Rising Star Cave, where Homo naledi was found. This discovery was mind-blowing because it was a huge collection of bones deep inside a very challenging cave system. It hints that maybe we've been looking in the wrong places, or not deep enough. The fact that an entire new species of human ancestor was found so recently in a well-explored area tells you how much more there is to discover. What about other parts of Africa? We can't just focus on the famous spots. Chad in Central Africa gave us Sahelanthropus chidensis, or Tumai. This fossil is incredibly old, around 7 million years, and it suggests that hominins were spread out across Africa much earlier than we thought. Finds in places like Chad are harder to come by because of the dense vegetation in some areas, or just the sheer remoteness and political challenges. But they show the potential of looking beyond the usual suspects. North Africa has also started to reveal its secrets. Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, for example, yielded very old Homo sapiens fossils, pushing back the date for the emergence of our own species to around 300,000 years ago. This completely changed the story of Homo sapiens' origins, suggesting we might have emerged across the whole continent, not just a single Garden of Eden in East Africa. This makes North Africa a very exciting place to continue searching. Okay, so Africa is critical. But humans didn't stay in Africa. The Out of Africa story, in its simplest form, says that different waves of hominins left Africa at different times. So, the next big find could easily be outside of Africa, shedding light on these migrations and the various human species that populated the rest of the world. Think about Eurasia. Georgia in the Caucasus region gave us Dmanisi. These were incredibly early Homo erectus fossils, showing that hominins left Africa much earlier than previously thought, nearly 2 million years ago. These individuals were small-brained, and their tool technology was simple, yet they managed to make it all the way to Georgia. This find was a massive surprise, and it made scientists rethink the requirements for leaving Africa. Further east, in Indonesia, we have the famous Java man Homo erectus. This was one of the very first human fossils ever found, back in the late 19th century. It showed that our ancestors were in Asia a long, long time ago. And then there's Flores Island, which gave us the hobbit Homo floresiensis, a tiny human, possibly a descendant of Homo erectus, showing island dwarfism. This was another huge surprise, a human species that survived until relatively recently. These islands in Southeast Asia, with their complex geography and isolated environments, could hold many more surprises. China has also been a rich source. Peking Man, another Homo erectus from Zhoukoudian, is famous. But there are many other sites in China revealing the story of early humans in Asia, including later archaic humans and early modern humans. There's so much territory in China and a long history of fossil finds that it's bound to keep yielding more. Europe, of course, is known for Neanderthals. Sites in France, Spain, Germany, and Croatia have given us thousands of Neanderthal fossils, showing us a lot about their lives, their culture, and their eventual disappearance. We've also found early Homo sapiens in Europe, sometimes interacting with Neanderthals. The Denisovans, known mostly from DNA found in a cave in Siberia, hint at a whole other group of archaic humans whose physical remains are still largely a mystery. Finding a complete Denisovan skeleton would be immense. And we can't forget the Middle East. It's the land bridge between Africa, Asia, and Europe. Sites in Israel have shown evidence of very early exits of Homo sapiens from Africa, even earlier than the main out-of-Africa migration that populated the world. The Arabian Peninsula, often overlooked because it's mostly desert now, was much greener in the past, with rivers and lakes. It was likely a major pathway for early human migrations out of Africa. Scientists are just starting to scratch the surface there. So beyond the well-trodden paths, where else can we look? Southeast Asia, beyond Indonesia, is a good bet. Countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, and Laos have complex cave systems. We already have the recent discovery of Homo luzonensis in the Philippines. This shows that the islands of Southeast Asia are a hotbed for unexpected human species. The combination of ancient coastlines, caves, and unique island evolution could be a goldmine. Imagine more human species, isolated and adapting in strange ways, waiting to be found. Central Asia is another region that hasn't seen the same level of systematic paleoanthropological work as other parts of the world. Countries like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan sit at a crossroads of ancient migration routes. The Altai Mountains, where Denisovan DNA was found, are just one example of the potential. These vast, often harsh landscapes could hide critical pieces of the puzzle, especially regarding the dispersal of archaic humans and the interactions between different groups. The Arabian Peninsula, as I mentioned, is ripe for more exploration. While it's a desert now, paleoclimate data shows it was much wetter in cycles. Ancient rivers and lakes would have supported wildlife, and potentially hominins. Finding fossils there is hard because the sand covers so much, but when the wind shifts, it can expose new areas. It's a huge, largely unexplored region that was critical for the early dispersal of humans. Even within Africa, there are vast regions that are less explored. Think about parts of West Africa, Central Africa beyond Chad, or areas in Southern Africa that aren't part of the famous cradle. These areas might be difficult to access due to dense forests, political instability, or simply a lack of funding for sustained expeditions. But life doesn't just stick to convenient spots. Hominins moved and lived across the continent. There's no reason to think their fossils are only in a few places. It just takes someone to get out there and start looking. What kind of fossils are we really hoping to find? We want older hominins. The very earliest ones, those species that bridge the gap between our last common ancestor with chimpanzees and the earliest known Australopithecus. Finds like Sahelanthropus, Orin, and Ardipithecus are incredibly important. They push back the timeline and show us the very first steps towards bipedalism. Finding even older ones or more complete skeletons of these early forms would be monumental. Transitional forms are also huge. We have big gaps in the fossil record. We don't have a clear step-by-step progression from one species to the next. Finding something that clearly links, say, a late Australopithecus to an early Homo, or clarifies the relationships between different Homo species would be massive. It's like finding missing pages from a very old book, and of course more early Homo sapiens. Jebel Irhoud was amazing, but there could be older ones, or ones in unexpected places. The story of our own species' origins is still being written, and more fossils could rewrite it entirely. Did we really emerge across the whole of Africa, or was there a core region that then dispersed? More fossils will help clarify this. Then, there are the ghost lineages species we know about only from their DNA, like some of the Denisovan relatives. We know they existed because their DNA is in modern humans, but we don't have their bones yet. Finding the actual physical remains of one of these mystery humans would be astonishing. It would put a face to a name, so to speak. And more complete skeletons, always. Even a single tooth can tell us a lot, but a relatively complete skeleton, like Lucy or the Naledi individuals, provides so much more information about how they moved, what they ate, how big they were, and their overall lifestyle. These are the real gold mines. It's not just bones, though. Sometimes evidence of behavior found with fossils is just as important. Early stone tools, cut marks on animal bones, signs of fire use, these things tell us about the intelligence and capabilities of our ancestors. Finding these clues in direct association with hominin fossils is incredibly powerful. So, how do people actually find these things? It's not just random digging. A lot of it still comes down to basic surveying. Walking, walking, walking. Scientists spend months, even years, crisscrossing promising geological areas looking for any sign of bone eroding out of the ground. This is how most of the famous finds were made. It's tedious, hard work, often in remote, hot, and dusty places. But it's effective. Understanding the geology is key. Paleontologists and geologists work together. They know what kind of rock formations are likely to preserve fossils. They look for specific sedimentary layers, ancient riverbeds, or areas where erosion is actively exposing older strata. Local knowledge is also incredibly important. People who live in these areas have often seen strange bones or stone tools their whole lives. Engaging with local communities, respecting their traditions, and listening to their observations can lead to amazing discoveries. Many expeditions rely heavily on local guides and workers who know the landscape intimately. Technology is starting to play a bigger role too. Satellite imagery and drones can help identify promising geological features over vast areas. They can spot ancient river systems or fault lines that might expose fossil-bearing layers. LIDAR, which uses lasers to map terrain, can even help researchers see through dense vegetation to find hidden caves or subtle topographical changes that might indicate a site. Non-molecular techniques are also exciting. Scientists are now able to extract ancient DNA from cave sediments, even if no bones are found. This eDNA environmental DNA can tell us what species were present in a cave hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's how we know Denisovans were in the Altai Mountains before we even had many of their bones. And proteomics, studying ancient proteins from tiny bone fragments, can help identify species even when the DNA is too degraded. And dating techniques are always improving. Argon-argon dating, luminescence dating, uranium series dating, these methods allow scientists to get more precise ages for fossils and the layers they are found in, providing a crucial timeline for human evolution. But there are also big challenges. Funding is always a major hurdle. Paleontology expeditions are expensive. They require specialized equipment, logistical support, and long-term commitment. Getting grants is competitive. Political instability in many promising regions can make fieldwork dangerous or impossible. Researchers sometimes have to suspend work or avoid certain areas altogether, leaving potentially important sites unexplored. Logistics are tough. Many of the most promising sites are in very remote areas, far from roads, electricity, or clean water. Getting equipment, supplies, and people to these places, and then keeping them supplied, is a monumental task. Well, climate change is a double-edged sword. On one hand, changing weather patterns, increased erosion, or melting ice could expose new fossil sites. On the other hand, it could also destroy existing sites or make areas inaccessible. Coastal erosion could wash away important evidence. Finally, there's the critical need to train local scientists. Building paleoanthropological capacity in host countries is essential. It ensures that the research benefits the local communities and that the work can continue sustainably for generations. And even with all the science, all the technology, and all the effort, there's still an element of luck. A lot of luck. Being in the right place at the right time, seeing that tiny glint of bone in the dirt, recognizing its importance, it often comes down to this. So, where will the next great human fossil be found? It's really anyone's guess, but it's an educated guess. It could be in the well-known hotspots of East Africa, as continued erosion exposes new layers, or as new search areas are identified within the vast Rift Valley system. It could be in the deep, complex cave systems of South Africa, where new chambers are always being explored, like with Homo naledi. It could be in the less explored regions of Africa, Chad, Sudan, the Sahara fringes, West Africa, where political will and funding might open up vast new territories to systematic exploration. These areas are huge blanks on our map of human origins. It could be in the vast, ancient landscapes of the Arabian Peninsula or Central Asia, where changing environments and new research efforts are starting to reveal migration routes and forgotten populations. Or it could be in the islands of Southeast Asia, continuing to surprise us with strange, isolated human species that rewrote the rules of what it means to be human. The next big find could be an older, more complete early hominin that clarifies our split from other apes. It could be a brand new species of human that challenges our understanding of human diversity. It could be an early Homo sapiens fossil that pushes back our origins even further, or shifts where we think our species emerged. Or it could be the complete skeleton of a Denisovan, giving us a physical form for a species we mostly know from DNA. The search continues. Every year, new expeditions go out. New technologies are developed. And every now and then someone finds something amazing. It's a testament to human curiosity, persistence, and the incredible deep history of our own species. The story is far from complete, and the next chapter is just waiting to be uncovered, somewhere out there in the dust and rocks of our ancient past.